This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 116. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. Welcome back, friends, protectors of the turn. We're back, and I'm even more stoked because I've got old Telly Tay here with me today.
We're back. Good to be back on the podcast, as always.
Stoked to have you, and I think this is going to be a fun one. So I guess let's hop right into some quick news, room and notes, because I want to get to the actual episode. So instead of me trying to relay what's going on at the shop, why don't you give people the lowdown on what's the lowdown?
Yeah, shout out to Miles taking over my old YouTube show. What's going on at the shop? Well, we are getting low on some gear, and we've got good stock on other stuff. There's still hopefully plenty of winter still to go. So if you were thinking about getting something new set up, please get in touch with us. We're pretty stocked on boots, decent stock on bindings, a little light on skis sitting in the shop at the moment, but still have a lot of ability to order something in for a special order to help put a package together for you. I know Volet's got pretty good stock on pretty much all their skis right now. So if you don't see them available on our website, just give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, whatever. We'll be able to line that up for you. Demos have been going out. The demo fleet's up and rolling. If you're curious about trying a new ski, new binding, just want to try something different for whatever reason, we've got the demos going. Overall, shop's been busy this year, so thank you to everybody out there listening and everybody that shops with us. It's been awesome. As far as shop stuff goes, we're going to be cranking here for another 8 weeks ish, mid-April, something like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so kind of another winter is going by fast, and it's unfortunately we haven't had a ton of snow recently, but the buoy popped. So I think this coming weekend we're supposed to get a storm.
What's the buoy?
The powder buoy. It's kind of a Utah guy that does some weather forecasting based off. I think there's a buoy that measures like waves. I think that's what they do. I'm not a super buoy guy. Some people swear by the buoy, but there's this.
I'm out of the loop on this
weather station / buoy. Like I think it's off. It's like off near Hawaii. No.
Oh, okay.
And it's like 2 weeks out from all the storms. And when there's big waves around that one buoy, there's snow that usually comes 2 weeks later, approximately, to the Wasatch Mountains. So we're crossing our fingers for that because we've definitely been in some high pressure. That being said, the snow's been pretty good. Like it hasn't snowed in over a month, basically, or much more than a dusting. But mountains holding up, snow's staying cold. So yeah, we like skiing powder, but I've been having fun just skiing in general. So that's fine. Yeah, you guys can look into the powder buoy if you're more interested.
I've never been a weather guy. I just kind of go.
Yeah, I'll look at like a 12-hour forecast, but yeah, I'm pretty much, if I'm skiing on Mondays, I'm going skiing on Mondays, whether it's good or not. I guess that probably wraps up shop stuff of, we do have some inventory left, and if we're not sitting on it right now, there is still some stock available of stuff, so let us know. We can always happy to help put together a package for you. World Telemark Day is coming up. Oh, wait,
hang on. I was going to say, with demos.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone enjoyed the demos at the Midwest Telefest.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That just happened this past weekend. And Keith Opperman, Freeheel Life certified ski tech and demo rep, was there with Miles, shop manager and T2 guru of all things shipping and sales.
Yeah, pretty much this year. It looked like they had a blast up there. It snowed for them. Miles said it was the first powder skiing he'd practically done all season, because I don't think he skied too much in December when we were, for whatever reason, when we were actually getting some storms. But
I'm just curious if anybody actually saw T2's haircut or not, because if anybody follows the Instagram, I didn't realize till I walked in the other day that he actually legit looked like a 50-year-old man, because he had this weird mustache and then he shaved a bald, like...
Yeah, Nate did that for him. Nate gave him the cut.
Nate gave him the cut?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he looked like a bald guy where the hair was only around the sides of his head, but then he had this really funky little mustache. And then I don't know what it is, man. I must be getting old, because like the glasses he wears too are like 1980s. I don't even want to go down
yeah, it's kind of an old school, like just wireframe.
Creeper glasses, dude. He looks like a creeper. Anyway, so if you saw T2 and Miles and Keith and the rest of the crew, Gavin, Keith's son, and everybody else that was helping out there, I know they were staying with my old friend Steve Berthel, who I was texting with, and sounded like they had a good time. So hopefully they drank some Telewhacker beer and everybody celebrated. It's good to see everybody back on the hill. So, okay. I just wanted to mention that. Oh, also, hopefully you guys had a good time at Telefestivus and in Colorado. I think those were the only two I knew that were going on this past weekend.
Yeah.
All right. Now,
and as Josh always says, if you guys got events going on and you need a little bit of Telemark pirate radio promotion, send it to podcast.
Really, that's really what this is at this point. It's pirate radio.
So yeah, they had fun at Midwest Telefest. I certainly had fun last year, and of course wanted to go back, but wanted to spread the love a little bit, and we sent Miles and T2. But on our radar, as far as events go, World Telemark Day, we will be celebrating and hosting a demo day Saturday, March 5th at Alta. We got 22 Designs on board, and I think I locked in Volay to come join us. So we're going to have 3 demo tents up there this year, and that's going to be fun. We'd love for any of you, local or not, to come join us. I would give the warning that things are a little bit different in Little Cottonwood this year with parking reservations. So if you're a pass holder, you know how that rolls. If you're not, altaparking.com. It's pretty easy to get a parking reservation. That system has been a big change, but it seems to be working as far as, I don't know, knock on wood. I have not really sat in red snakes yet this year, which has been super cool.
Really? Even coming down, huh?
Maybe just got lucky. I've seen evidence on a few of the Wasatch Mountain meme pages that it's still a semi-junk show, but for the most part, it's been good, and we're super stoked to celebrate World Tele Day, and stoked that we could get, a big demo day put together up at Alta. Alta's definitely got a good tele population, and it's a good mountain for tele skiing because everything's a traverse or a sidestep away, and it's a little easier to do that when you're on tele skis and you can kind of waddle around. So we're looking forward to that. Is this the eighth official version of World Telemark Day?
Yeah, I think it's his 8th official. If you need the press release is on telemarkskier.com. It's got the logo and info. So if you want to put a little flyer together for your local gathering, or maybe you're a marketing person at a ski resort, or a marketing person at a ski resort, and they just want to put a little, hey, all telemarketers in the area meet up, you can snag that press release and reuse it, snag the logo. You can always hit us up at customer service at freeheellife.com if you have questions, and we can kind of help guide you. But I was going to say, mark your calendar, first Saturday in March every year, World Telemark Day. And definitely if you're in the Western U.S. or you want to come here, definitely plan on coming out to Utah, because we're going to try and get more people out here next year too. So kind of build upon it. That's crazy. Next year is going to be number 9.
Yeah.
That's pretty rad.
I kind of forget. Sometimes I just get into the day to day, and then, we've been doing this for a while.
You've worked here that long?
Yeah. I've worked here like a third of my life.
That's so crazy. Wow.
which is another weird way to put it, but
that's a really weird way to put it.
I guess true, mathematically speaking.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's strange because I think I moved pre-shop. Oh yeah, no. Yeah, 10 years ago is when I first got in the building before the shop even opened. So that's even crazier. A decade. I would have been 33 years old. I was a young man. All right. Well, I think that's it. So World Telemark Day, demos at Alta. Shout out to Alta and their marketing department for having us. They've always been really supportive of the Freeheel Life team and all the telemarketers out there. So we really appreciate that. And I think that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, pretty much it. I think now is a good time to get into wrap up our newsroom and notes with the big news.
The big news. So I'd like to start with a moment of silence. Okay, 75 millimeter has died.
Sort of.
That's what we're going to talk about today. This is why I wanted to have Taylor on here, because we've been kind of shooting ideas back and forth, and Dosty's been putting out the news on telemarkskier.com about all three boot companies discontinuing 75 millimeter products over the past month. And a lot of this kind of we caught wind of it. I think through ordering sheets, right? Like almost like, hey, we're going to order next year. You're talking to a rep or something. That's probably...
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we heard the Scarpa news earliest just because we have a good relationship with those guys, and their reps take care of us. And we kind of knew that was coming, and that was public information as of, a week and a half ago or something like that the T1 is being discontinued. So not all 75 millimeter products are dead. They will still have the T2 Eco, T2 Eco Women's, and the T4 on the catalog, but they do not make a big, powerful 75 millimeter boot anymore.
Yep. And because I think we've got news from Scarpa and Scott and Crispy. But before we would get into it, let's talk a little more generally about 75 millimeter, because this is obviously, like, people are freaking out. I mean, there's people getting upset, on the internet, on forums. What are you seeing? I want to ask your opinion on this. What are you seeing in general? What's the common theme that how are they responding?
Well, I think some people are in shock. Some people think that they knew it was coming and just now's the time. And I think it also, just begs a question about what almost like defines our sport. I think, Josh, you've talked, and maybe an episode with me as well, we've kind of talked about it being a way to fasten your toe and not your heel to a ski. And obviously 75 millimeter has been around our sport for, I don't even know when 75 millimeter Nordic norm was a thing in the Nordic world.
That I don't actually know that either.
I would say like 70s were
definitely 1970s. Obviously, there was a 75 millimeter norm, because back then you would have had like Delibier's, which is a leather boot, a Solo, Oslo, depending on if you're Americanizing it. Yeah, I don't know. That's actually a good question, because some of those early Nordic toes that we've looked at that were not. Maybe even like late 60s, but yes, fascinating. Keep going. I'm curious to see what you're going to say on this.
I think, and there's a lot of people that's maybe are comfortable with the familiarity of that. Ultimately, it comes down to the product and what people are buying. I think there's some things like in the Scott world where they just don't make a 75 millimeter boot at all. That's different than Scarpa having offerings that kind of still fit a need from a Telemark skier or a Freeheel skier or whatever word you want to say, that is not necessarily solved with NTN at the moment. So that's a whole other topic of like, there might be holes in the NTN market if that's the way we're going, which that's the way it is, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, there's no discrepancy there.
Like, that's just the way it's going. So, you know, I think ultimately it comes down to, for tele skiers, this sensation thing. Like, some people are 75 millimeter, you know, till death, or whatever they want to say, 75 millimeter for the rest of their life. I think, like, I kind of asked the question of why. Do you just care about the shape of your boot, or do you care about the sensation on snow? Because if it's just a sensation on snow, there's opportunity for other products that use an NTN connection. And if they create that sensation for you, what's the difference?
Yeah, dude, you nailed it. I'm glad. That's funny that because we didn't talk about this before we hopped on, and that was the one point I was going to bring up, is why the big fuss, you know? Because, and then I started thinking about this after you and I talked the other day, and I realized that is, you know, we talk about that sensation and customization and all that, but yeah, I think this is less, for me, it's kind of silly that people are getting so upset. I get it, because if people aren't paying attention, you know, and they're just going along and they're like, oh my God, the boots are gone. And you're like, it just kind of catches you off guard. Like, if you're not, you know, we're around it all the time. And so it to me, it seems sort of like whatever, but I think you bring up the best point, which is, I don't think this is really about 75 millimeter dying, unless you really do like the look of your boot, which is highly possible. Some people are feet people.
I mean, yeah,
I'm just going to leave it at that. I mean,
yeah.
I like the square toe. Like, when I first started telemarking years ago, I was like, check out my toes and my boots. This is rad.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying, it plays into this idea. Like, I've always said, one day we're just going to call it a Telemark binding again, because at some point we called 75 millimeter Telemark. We didn't even call it 75. I mean, you might refer like the measurement of the toe, which, by the way, if you're a newbie out there and you're like listening to this podcast, 75 millimeter is the what we call the duckbill toe on a Telemark boot. It's the measurement, 75 millimeters across the toe, and then NTN new Telemark norm. So this is like deep dive, and if someone's like finding this and they're just starting out, they're probably like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah, I guess just to clarify some of the jargon, I guess.
Yeah, but I think this is less about the death of 75 millimeter and more about what opportunities need to be addressed in NTN, i.e. a Telemark binding to fit, right? Like,
yeah, like I would pose the question of, you know, sorry, Targa people, like, we don't mean to pick on you, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but let me pose the question of, if you had a TX Pro, for example, just because that's kind of the standard of the NTN boots at the moment, if you had a TX Pro and a binding that skied in a way that was indistinguishable from a Targa, what's the difference?
Right. Exactly. Like, there is no difference, but that's the example, right? Like, and I know we dealt with that a lot kind of in the early days of the shop. It was always like, hey, person, you know, like, you've got Targas. And I mean, that was always the hardest gap, you know, like, especially because we sold like Rotofella free rides, you know, in the early days, Freedom, which Freedom actually was semi-decent, it seemed like with the green spring.
Pretty neutral feeling binding, similar to that. You know, I think the one thing, at least with the NTN, that is, in my eyes, like, it's not a fact you can argue, that you have more edge pressure, which I think makes skiing easier, which is attractive to me. I want to be the best Telemark skier I can be. I think most of us would, whatever that means to you, I think most of us would like that. I mean, it's more fun to be better at things. It's more fun to do them with less energy, less effort, I guess. And the NTN connection does provide more edge pressure. Now, I don't know if we can...
I would say more edge pressure with less technique.
Okay. Fair.
Because it's more laterally stable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's more immediate. You know, you look at, and I would even argue like Outlaw versus, I'd say Outlaw and Majo even versus like Rotofella Freeride. Because Freerides kind of can have that little twist.
Yeah, just that like softer plastic plate.
Yep.
And then, I mean, technically there's a cable on a Freeride.
Yeah, that's true.
Where you might get some of that lateral twist, but...
Yeah, no, lateral stability with less technique. Like you could achieve it, but you kind of, like on an NTN binding, like an Outlaw, you don't even have to think.
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes side to side. Sorry, I just wanted to interject with that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, with these products being discontinued, you know, part of it is probably an accounting decision from these companies, where if the NTN boots are sold at a 10 or 20x rate of the 75 millimeter boots, they're going to put their resources into that other category. Some of it is probably, I think it would be beneficial for our world to everybody kind of be developing off of the same platform, so that if it's kind of like, maybe if there's a limit on how you could design a product, you're constrained by that, but you can create opportunity within that constraint of, if this is the way the boot and binding are fastened, okay, this is the skiing sensation an engineer might be trying to achieve. There's definitely gaps in the NTN, or gaps meaning opportunity. There's opportunity for products on that platform. You know, there's currently not really a Scarpa T2 equivalent, which is a softer flexing, lower cut boot that needs to be here, because there's people that not just like that sensation, but might need that sensation. You know, when we're selling someone a new boot, it's what performance are you looking for as a skier and what works best for you. You know, the way I set up my boots is not the best way to set up the boot for someone else. The way someone else sets up the boot for optimal performance is maybe not the best way to set it up for me. So I think there's gaps in the product line, but I want, instead of saying gaps, I want to say opportunity. You know, there's opportunity for growth and development and expansion upon that. And I think we can look at the past. There was a T2 equivalent in the NTN world, and I think at the time there was a gap of the bindings didn't really match up with that class of boot. So if it was TX, which is a discontinued boot, and T2, with T2 you had all of these options for bindings. When TX was around, you pretty much had Freeride and Freedom, and if those didn't meet your needs, there was no incentive to get onto that new system.
Yeah, I think and I think this is always the funny part about the history of boots, is I think we've talked about NTN. If you haven't listened to NTN versus 75 millimeter, I think it was one of the earlier episodes. I talked a lot about this, and I've alluded to like where NTN like tech toe came from, you know, and it was like the boot kind of became before the binding, you know, like we didn't have tech toe, for instance, but the boot had tech inserts, so then people like made the bindings. It's been weird, and then I don't know if that was even a clear explanation, but the point I'm trying to get to is it's almost as if we had TX at the point where it didn't necessarily make sense for the binding and what was going on in the community, and they discontinued it before like the binding technology sort of caught up. And I think that's where these gaps are happening. And I mean, quite frankly, like you and I know this, the companies out there don't actually realize a lot of this stuff. Like, it's kind of funny. It's not funny. I mean, it'd be cool if
it's almost kind of sad.
It's kind of sad because, you know, I think you and I talk a lot about this on the side. It's like the simplification. Sometimes I think we overcomplicate the topic, and I'm saying we, like, as a Telemark world, and I'm mostly I'm throwing stones at the boot makers, honestly, because I think if they understood what people needed, it would simplify it. And really, like what we're saying with 75, like I think this is a blessing in disguise, not a bad thing, because it gives one platform, NT, new Telemark norm, which isn't new. It's been around since 2008, so it's not new, right? But it gets everybody like in one platform, so then you can fill in these gaps and go, oh, you know, I know we've spoken to boot manufacturers before, and we're like, people still love the Targa, and they'll be like, what? It's like they don't even believe us. And the only reason we're seeing these types of variations of people and gear is because of the shop being Telemark specific. We see, you guys are seeing all sorts of combinations of stuff. And, you know, another gap that comes to mind right off the bat, there's no Mondo 31 or 32 in NTN,
or 21.5 22.
Correct. So like on the small end and the large end. And if anybody's out there and you're thinking, no, Crispy has 31, it is not true. It is literally the same size as a 30 shell with a really paper thin liner. So I just want to point that out because that's kind of BS.
Yeah, it's very weird where they have the 29.5, the 30, and the 30.5 all on the same shell.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, anyways, that's just a BS call out.
Yeah, well.
So you're missing big sizes, small sizes. You're missing different types of flex. There's no NTN binding that has a pivot point adjustability either. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could maybe make the argument for TTS bindings, but...
I mean, yeah. Technically, like the Lynx has an adjustable pivot position.
Oh, Lynx does have pivot.
It like sort of only adjusts like half of the pivot because is a cable on those springs, and it adjusts the point that the flex plates adjust, like flex at, but it doesn't change where the cable pivots on. Also, like maybe that's like an unnecessary call out. Like there's a pretty good level of customization with the current offerings, but it's not, there's room for improvement.
Well, and the other thing I always see on the internet is my favorite phrase, rugged touring. I love that people call it that. I'm pretty sure Dosty came up with that word. Maybe he didn't, but I remember him was one of the first people I heard that said rugged touring, and I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, T4 people, which we always know there's some crossover that's almost Nordic, almost walking through the woods, kind of cruiser, walking the dog on some scaled skis. That's like T4 person. It's a pretty rare, I'm not going to say it's never happening, that you have a T4 3-pin T4 Targa combo at the resort, but I think it's less. It's more likely you're going to see T2 Eco, like you said, on a cable binding or something like that. But yeah, imagine if you had NTN. I'm not against this. Like having a T4 with some lightweight tech thing for like a cruiser setup, that honestly would be pretty cool.
It'd be pretty cool, and it would, on paper, be better from like the touring aspect of, if you had a T4 with T4 class NTN boot with tech pins and a light flexing tech binding.
Yeah, there was, now that I'm thinking about it, because wasn't there the ATK binding? I've never seen it in person, but there was like a tech 3, almost like a tech 2-pin.
Yeah, basically like a 2-pin, 3-pin binding that,
yeah,
it didn't even have springs. It literally had these like weird arms that folded kind of back towards towards your bellow. grabbed the boot, and then it was kind of all boot flex from roughly your toes / ball of your foot, somewhere in between there. I mean, that could work. I've never seen those in person. I've just seen them on the internet, but
yeah. And I'm not saying like T4 has to go away. Honestly, we've always said at the shop that's almost like a different category. It's sort of like where leather left off. Like if someone, like I said, it's that woodsman, walker person, rugged tourer.
Yeah.
I mean, that phrase is pretty legit. Like that makes sense. Rugged touring. It's maybe not like the setup that someone's going to have in like the Wasatch, like a big Rocky Mountain kind of, Sierra type touring person. I don't know. The words get kind of mixed up there, but T2 for sure is missing in the lineup. And I'm trying to think what else. Where else do you think it's missing? I mean, comps are pretty stiff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like people would argue that like the walk mode on the boots, like that could be upgraded, and I'm sure whenever we get the new thing that will be a feature, that it will have a better walk mode for the backcountry skiing. But I mean, features of stuff, like I'm excited for whatever features are coming, but it's also like, from a retail perspective, from a just overall sport perspective, like we need options with the new system, and there will be a demand for that stuff, almost like for whatever reasoning. Maybe now it's just the reasoning of that option is no longer an option with a 75 millimeter toe. The demand is either created because the boot manufacturers stop making that boot, or because the people are demanding that product. It's like, and that, I guess that's sort of a combination of, if a manufacturer kills your option to do it this way, hopefully they provide the option to do it the other way. And I think, it's also, I mean, 75 millimeter is not, it's not like those products are going to just cease to exist. There's obviously decades and decades worth of products out there. You might have a full quiver of skis in the garage that's set up for that system. It's obviously going to be expensive if you were going to convert, all of those existing skis to the new platform. But it's like, you don't necessarily have to do that all at once. Like, you and I still own a pair or multiple pairs of 75 millimeter boots. Even if I just owned one, I can still keep that product and ski those setups. But the next new thing that I buy, whether we like it or not, is kind of getting forced to be on the new system. And yeah, that's a big change for our world, but I don't know that that's a bad thing.
Yeah, well, and I think the thing you hit on earlier too is the hope is that these gaps are, if you stop doing something, it's hopefully means that there's a redirection of resources into other opportunities, because the opportunities are 100% there. Like, no matter what anybody says, is Telemark's alive and well, and people need these various options from a retail perspective. Like us, being able to sell people this stuff. Yeah, it's like, I mean, we could sell more to more people if there was more options to drum up combinations, and there just isn't. But so I kind of want to like parlay this into, like, let's talk. We kind of talked about Scarpa specifically, but just so people know, let's go through each of the brands, because Scarpa, I think that was the first one Scott was the first one we talked about on telemarkskier.com. So let's start there. So Scott, for those of you that, the quick history on Scott is Garmont was once a Telemark boot manufacturer. Scott acquired Garmont's boot molds many years ago and basically rebranded the boot under the Scott name but they kept the same boots, to the point where they even brought back one of the 75 millimeter boots that was the Energy.
Yeah.
But then they called it the Synergy.
Which was an old Garmont boot.
Yeah. So anyways, the gist of the story is Scott never made a Telemark boot. Like, they never designed a boot from scratch and put it out on the market. It was all Garmont. So they're going to maintain their profit. Wait, why am I blanking?
The Voodoo. Which was the Garmont Profit.
I always mess it up because they've changed they've just switched the names around. Sorry. Okay. Voodoo NTN. Yes. But they're going to get rid of the Voodoo 75 millimeter boot, and they're getting rid of the Synergy. And what that gets rid of, and maybe just to point out, is the Synergy was a good kind of reboot, pun intended, of that boot, because it had a 103 last, and so like people with really wide feet, that was a good option. And that's not something that quite exists in NTN currently in the boots. And then the Voodoo was typically narrow. I think Voodoo 75 is 100.
Yeah, Voodoo's 100 millimeters, so that's narrower. The other fit profiles of that is the Voodoo compared to a Scarpa feels slightly narrower, slightly more volume vertically in the boot. So it's kind of like, I wouldn't say like a weird fit, but it's not like a super common fit. Certainly there's lots of tricks in boot fitting to take up volume or to create space, but yeah, I mean, that's two offerings that they are discontinuing this year. And technically the Excursion, which is the 2-buckle low cut kind of Scarpa T4 style boot, and then the kids boot, the G-Rex, again, those were Garmont products. Those were sort of like sneakily discontinued like 2 years ago, and then there was a little bit of like floating around inventory, but it's a big shift for them. And I don't know, I mean, if we want to talk about just like the businesses in general, like I think Scott is like kind of like the least invested in Tele. Like I don't really know.
I'd say that, yeah, I mean, I think that's the key word is, was Scott ever invested into Tele? I mean, they made the acquisition. I mean, I don't know how much they acquired it for. Totally different time period too. But they never invested. You know what I mean? They were invested. Obviously there was a cost. I'm not saying like they got it for free. So they were invested for the cost of production. But I honestly, sometimes I wonder, like, how long ago did they actually stop making some of these boots?
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been years ago.
Yeah, I mean, when was the last time that plastic was injected into one of those molds? Like,
I mean, honestly, if sales were bad and they kind of saw the writing on the wall, you know, in terms of, you know, because I mean, there's certain countries you'll see Scott boots, you know, but it's like not that frequent, you know. It's not, especially here in the US, like, to put it in perspective, I mean, Scarpa has like 95% of the market for Telemark boots here, so you see Scott, but it's not like an enormous amount. So I don't know, like, how invested were they? That's the question. And then how long ago did they, I mean, I can't imagine it was just like a sudden, you know, thing. They're just like, well, I guess it's all over this year. I wonder if it was like 5 years ago and they're just like, well, we're finally out of the boots. Better tell everybody.
Yeah.
It could have been that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know the details, and I don't know if we have access to that information, but yeah, at some point they stopped producing them. They probably had stuff sitting in a warehouse, and when retailers or consumers ordered them, they were able to fulfill until a certain point, and now they're not. What
do you think is going to happen? So here's the question. I mean, the elephant in the room of that is, does Scott continue to be involved in Telemark boots? Like, what percentage do you actually give them to keep going?
Maybe, like, I mean, I would, the 10%, like, I don't really see, I would be so surprised if they came out with something new. They might make the Voodoo for a couple more years, but I don't really see, like, I don't really see the, almost like, I don't see the point of Scott being there from Scott's perspective. Like, I hope they stay around because it's beneficial to consumers and the sport to have more products, products that are competing with each other to hopefully improve things. We see that on the binding front for sure. Maybe that's just because bindings are easier to build than a ski boot. But if Scott came out with a new Tele boot, like, I guess I'll be the first to admit I was wrong, but I don't see that coming.
Well, and here's the question too: is like what customer profile goes with that current Scott Voodoo NTN boot? Like, because it is nice to have that option, but that boot. I mean, I guess my question to you from the retail side, because I haven't been up front in a couple of years, selling those boots. The sad part is they haven't changed.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious, like, I always felt like there was kind of a place for it just because it was an option. But I guess here's the question. Like, let me put it this way. Is there something that's not in Scarpa's NTN line or even a Crispy that doesn't do better than that boot?
I mean, from a performance standpoint, no. Really, it comes down to fit. Some people just, for whatever reason, can't fit into the other two brands that the Scott works for them, and that's the boot that they choose based on fit.
But from a performance aspect, it's not really there.
Not really.
I mean, because I think about like how soft the shell is, like the other thing, it doesn't have that instep strap on that one. Mm-hmm. It's 3-buckle. Am I thinking about that right? Two up, one down, right?
Yeah, it's a 3-buckle, but it's like not a 3-buckle boot in the sense of we talk about 3-buckle boots being like lower cuff. I would say the most technical term I can come up for that boot is squishy. Yeah, pretty much.
Like when you flex down, it almost like breathes outward in the center of the boot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Like right at the ankle flex, it's almost like the boot kind of, if you flex forward at the ankle, it's sort of like it extends outward at the ankles.
Yeah.
I've always liked the bellows on those, but they're softer for me. That could be my fault for being too heavy. I don't.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
Basically, yeah, that boot is pretty soft in the bellows. I would say that boot's sort of like laterally stiff. Just the way that construction is a little bit different, where the tongue and the lower, it's basically a 2-piece boot versus Scarpa and Crispy's are 3-piece boots. So it's the lower, or the scaffo is the Italian word for that, the cuff and the tongue in the Scarpa and the Crispy, but the Scott, the tongue is kind of molded into the lower of the boot. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's also just not from a product standpoint, but from a company standpoint of Scott has so many other things in their catalog, from skis to outerwear to goggles to poles to mountain bikes to motocross pads to like just sort of all over the place, that we look at the history of big companies involved with Tele. What do? They trim it because they don't want to invest the time or resources into a small line item for them like that. That's the Black Diamond example.
Yep. I mean, and we've talked about this, forever. I mean, it is this is why, I'm always talking about a Telemark industry, and people always are like, there's no way you could never have a Telemark boot company. Look, I'm a dreamer, like imagine if you did. Again, there's a limit, right? Like, but how much could you innovate or make options like we're talking about if you are Telemark centric even.
I mean, we do have examples of that, like companies like 22 Designs, where that is all they do, tele.
Yep.
What do they do within that? They have 5 different bindings on their catalog right now, and I know they're working on something else, like, because that's what they do. They sell their bindings, they take that money and they put it into R&D for the next binding project.
Well, and it's happened. I mean, I don't think there's ever been, maybe unless you go back to leather, honestly, where it was like, that's all that was made by that company. But if you look at the lineup of Scarpa, at one point you had, I mean, that's a great example. And Garmont too, and probably Crispy too. I mean, basically all of them at some point, the amount of focus put into the boot, was legit. Like they were putting a lot of time and effort into it, and there was a full lineup, like like take Scarpa, take a little window of time. TJ, kids boot. T4, low cuff 2 buckle. T2, maybe T2 Eco or T2X, 3 buckle, softer.
Men's and women's version. T1, men's and women's version.
Exactly.
T-Race, right? So it's like, I mean, they probably had 8 boots or 9 boots that were tele boots in that lineup.
And honestly, I think that's why Scarpa really has the ability, and possibly Crispy if they got back in. But to your point with Scott, it's just like, man, if you're the CFO, like you're looking at the line items on a sheet, and you have all that other stuff that probably more people do. You're chopping. There's no doubt. So it's just like, it's good business, right? Like it's a good business decision, and as those companies get larger and larger and have more diversity of product, they have to go with what's most profitable and, hopefully less risk, or a shorter amount of time for the risk. Anyways, I think, so my prediction, just to wrap Scott up, I think they're out within 2 years maximum total. I bet we're going to be talking about this in 24 months or less, that Voodoo NTN is gone. And it's just a matter of warehousing. Like once it's gone, it's just done.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. And frankly, not that many people are going to miss it. There will be some. I'm sorry. If you're skiing that boot, you'll probably miss it, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're on those stuff, you probably will miss it, but if that company doesn't have the market share, then they can't compete in that market. It's a hard fact for some people to hear, but that's kind of what it is.
Yep. Okay, so
I guess we'll see what happens, but that's our prediction.
Yeah, you agree with that?
Yeah, unfortunately. Like, I want there to be more companies competing in our space, but I don't see it.
Also, that boot, when you really put it in perspective, just to put a nice bow on it, that boot it's got to be 2008-ish, because it would have been like when Freeride came out.
Yeah, I mean, Scott did make a modification to that boot, and they put a tech insert in it.
Oh,
so
that's
they did
true.
make some investment. I don't know exactly how they make that, how much modification they had to do, what that costs. They did make a modification. They put a tech insert in it.
Shout out to Scott for the tech insert.
Other companies. Okay, let's maybe chat about Crispy for a moment.
Yeah. Give me your take.
Well, Crispy, as far as plastic ski boots go, they only make Telemark boots. They make a lot of other footwear. They used to make Alpine touring boots.
Yep.
They don't compete in that market anymore.
That was probably like, because I was thinking of that one pair that we had kicking around here somewhere, that was that red pair. That had to have been like Fritchie Freeride era, like
probably. And that red pair, I forget what the model that was. That was like the same mold as an Evo or a Evo World Cup, with a harder density plastic and like an alpine density plastic molded into where the bellow was.
Oh, that's right, because it didn't flex.
No, it didn't flex. It was like an alpine boot, but it looked like it looked like an NTN boot almost.
Probably made sense back in the day. They're like, well, we can use the same tooling and just harder plastic.
Yeah.
It's like flex rating 200.
Which is, kind of interesting. Like I think Crispy, again, it's not like any of the companies have brought anything new to the market. They're kind of just changing colors and buckles and now discontinuing products. Maybe there's room, or maybe they're working on something. I don't know. I think Crispy also is facing a problem in this country that it's very difficult to find a Crispy boot.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, we've never touched on that. I mentioned it to you the other day. I mean, the way that Crispy's imported into America, the people importing the boots they're not pricing that. Basically, they're pricing lower to undercut like Scarpa. I mean, that's pretty much what's going on. But it doesn't and they run retail as well. But it doesn't leave any room for margin for a shop like us to really get those products. And basically, shops like us, and I'm not saying just us, but I think a big reason other shops aren't carrying them is the margin is so low for the amount of risk. So the cost of each boot is so high compared to what you can make off of it. It's
it's one, a margin thing. It's two, just the distributor does not have a network of reps that's getting that product into other shops.
Yeah, and it's totally unfortunate because I think Crispy, again, it's an option, and I think if it was more widely spread out across North America, who knows? Like, I mean, when you're talking about 3 boot manufacturers and one of them has 95 or more % market share, it's like, I mean, there's some room for improvement, and there's shops that would totally carry that. I mean, they might not buy a lot of them, but But
you got to have it in a shop somewhere.
Yeah.
People are comfortable buying things online. Ski boots is one thing where if you have the option, you are totally going to that local shop to try it on.
Yep, that's the big thing, right? Like, you got to try it on. You want to flex it. Ideally, you want to demo it, rent it, whatever, and be able to go out and do it. Well, and so that's the news that came out last week is...
I mean, they're chopping the XP, which is their softer flexing 3-buckle 75 millimeter boot. I think they actually do still make leather boots and like kind of hybridized 75 millimeter. I don't even know. I guess they call it a backcountry boot. It's kind of like the Rosignol BCX, you know, which pairs up with these, slightly narrow, slightly side-cutted rugged touring skis. But they are keeping the XR, which is the 4-buckle powerful 75 millimeter boot.
That's interesting. See, and to put it in perspective for everyone out there, we have such little access to these boots. I'm not saying we couldn't get a pair, right? But in as long as I've been doing this in the US, it's always been hard to try those boots. And distribution back in the day when Alpina did it, it was still hard. I mean, this is I'm thinking mid 2000s. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was Alpina. You just never see them until you said that. I thought the XP was the stiff boot, which is kind of funny because I don't know if that's the right play. I would think if you're a 4-buckle, well, I mean, if it was a candy cane T race, I would be okay, right call.
Yeah, well, that kind of plays into Scarpa of going the opposite of keeping the softer flexing 75 millimeter boots and killing the stiffer 75 millimeter boots is because kind of if you're a 4-buckle stiff boot skier, you're going to like NTN.
For the most part. I did have an old friend, I won't say customer. she texted me and said she had 4 T1s in her closet unopened, and she just ordered another pair when we put that article out. And she's like, it's not going to get me to the end. but I get what you're saying. It's like, if you're a, I hate the word phrase performance skier, but I mean, if you're looking for performance, for most people, like we say, TX Pro, TX Comp, World Cup, Evo, whatever, and an Outlaw, and you're good to go, or a Majo, Lynx, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of where we're at. Like, that's...
And so in the Scarpa case, like, they chopped the worst seller, and it's the worst seller because the type of person that is that skier, for the most part, is purchasing NTN at this point.
Yeah, by the way, and this is what cracks me up, is like, I think I came into your office the other day when we were first talking about this stuff, and I think you mentioned like someone on the internet's like, how do you guys know? And I'm just like, I feel like T1 sales, it's pretty apparent. I don't know the exact data points, but I remember being in a meeting like 3 or 4 years ago, and NTN had already crested over the 50% mark. Like, I mean, this is a while back. I don't think people are necessarily reporting on it, but I think maybe that's why I'm not so surprised. It's just, the times come and the sales just aren't there. But I don't know. I mean, we sell T1, but not that much.
No, I still think we sell more T2s than T1s, and we're not the only retailer. We have a big presence, but we're not the only ones. But that's what my data suggests. That's on my sales reports, and it obviously matches up to what, someone else at Scarpa is seeing.
Well, and honestly, if you think about it, like, I've talked about retail, like, I always say Telemark's not dead. Telemark retail is dead. But the one that, meaning the shops that traditionally sold Telemark back in the day are, most of them are gone, but it makes the case. I think Scarpa in this particular case has made a good decision, because the surviving shops that are out there that have traditionally kept Telemark are backcountry shops. They're going, and backcountry meaning maybe some rugged touring folks, T4 people, and probably switchback X2 folks with a T2 Eco combo. So in that regard, I think Scarpa that's a smart decision, because if you're looking at the retail ability to sell, like, that's the go-to play, because you might get people that are using a T2 Eco and they're just cruisers in the backcountry on a scaled fish scale ski. I mean, it broadens the market, I guess, is the point I'm saying. So it is kind of funny that, like, where is Crispy selling a 4-buckle stiff 75 millimeter boot? Where?
I mean, yeah, maybe just, I don't know.
Please send your pictures in. If you are wearing an XR,
yep,
please send us photos and tell us your location. You don't have to be too specific, but
yeah, you don't have to give away your secret zone, But
I want to see it. I mean, in the last 5 years, how many XRs have you seen in Utah in the wild? New ones.
The blue and orange ones, maybe one.
There you go.
And my one other friend that is a Crispy person because of fit, he is happily converted from XR and Axle to Outlaw and World Cup.
Yep. All right. So, not to get too long-winded there, Crispy. Let's put a bow on that, and then we can kind of start wrapping up. Does Crispy stay in the game?
Yes, because they have a bigger presence in Europe, probably. Hopefully a growing presence in North America, but we'll see. And I think they'll stay by almost default of being number 2. Like, although Scarpa has a massive market share, I think number 2, there's still a place for number 2, but I don't know if there's a place for number 3 unless they do something different and make it right. Like, if you're going to capture market share, if I was working for Scott or working for Crispy, like, if that was my goal to capture market share from Scarpa, like, I have to make something new and make it available to people.
Yep. I think that's 100% the problem. Like we talked about at the beginning of the Crispy chat, is just availability. It just, you have to get that boot into whatever retailers are still out there that want to carry it. You have to make it, as a distributor, you need to make it attractive and competitive, both to the retailer, so they'll take the risk on and there's a reward, and frankly the customer, I mean, they can get a good deal if the distributor's willing to give that lower price, but I think there's just a limit to that. You know, there's a limit to how many you can bring in, because then it puts all that risk on the distributor, and then you're just trying to shovel them out as fast as you can. So I agree with you. I think for the good of the sport, and, you know, Crispy Europe probably needs to get a handle on it. And I wouldn't doubt if Crispy in Europe, I think if either there's multiple distributors in North America, whether it's in US or US Canada, like Canada struggles with getting boots from anybody. I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to see a price hike too, you know, if that ever happens. Anyways, that's my prediction there. I think they'll stay in too. That's kind of freaky that there's like 2 boot companies. Yeah,
it is. But it's like they either have an option to make a change or kill it.
Yep. And I will say, even though there's only 2 companies, essentially, I mean, there's 3 right now, there's good boots.
For sure.
People whine and cry so much about not having this or not having that. I think, if anything, from this podcast, I hope people walk away going, this is a good thing. As long as the players continue to realign the resources in that direction, hopefully we get more boots out of this thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because I think, you know, like we said, with the opportunity, if, you know, we want some maybe lighter news or good news, like there's opportunity there for sure from both boot and binding fronts. And, you know, we're missing things at the moment. We're missing full size runs. We're missing an entry level boot and binding, which I think maybe some people would argue is 75 millimeter is that entry level thing. And I mean, it's definitely more available on the used gear market, but it's not like a 75 millimeter boot is really any cheaper than a NTN boot. And here's another piece of news. 22 Designs axle will be more expensive than the Outlaw next year.
That's interesting.
So it's,
well,
it's like,
maybe that's the start of the phase out.
Might be.
I mean,
it's, and I guess we need entry level products because you need to be able to get more people into the space. So there's an opportunity there.
Well, and it's so funny as you're talking, my head's just spinning because I'm like, there's so many opportunities for those that are willing to pick up the torch. And I just think, like, when you're talking entry level, like I hadn't even been thinking about that. I mean, I know we've talked about it, but yeah, think about, what Volet's done since the 80s. That's amazing. Simplicity, and 22 Designs as well too. But yeah, like a Vice, no tour mode, which equals less cost, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. Easy to operate. And what's great for entry level. So again, I mean, we're talking boots, but with that comes all these opportunities for bindings too. You know, how many different bindings how many opportunities are there for people to make a different binding?
Well, and especially if everybody's on the same connection of NTN platform at this point, that means the opportunity to make some sort of entry-level product on one norm. If everyone is on one norm, there's more people on that norm to develop for.
Yeah, it's called the Telemark norm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, that's okay. Wow, that's interesting. Such a crazy situation, man. I guess I'm just like, it just gets my brain going all over the place, and I maybe we should have. I feel like this podcast was great, man. It's awesome talking to you about this, because I feel like, honestly, I get excited when we talk about this stuff, because I'm like, I hope it generates some positivity out of it. I know what I was going to say at the beginning of this, because if you're someone out there that thinks that if it's not 75 millimeter, it's not Telemark, you're wrong. I'm just going to say it straight out, because like I always say, Telemark is the turn. If the binding allows your heel to be free all the time and you can make a Telemark turn, it's Telemark. It literally doesn't matter how you fasten your foot to the ski. I mean, that's like basically saying like, well, back in the 1860s, you know, that birch binding that old Sondre Norheim had, that was not Telemark, because it wasn't 75 millimeter. That doesn't even make any sense. Yeah, that doesn't make
any sense.
No, I mean, you can make the argument that 75 millimeter is not Telemark because it's not a birch toe loop with a heel fixture.
Yeah.
So that's the point I wanted to make, because I keep hearing that. It's like, if it's not 75, it ain't Telemark. And it's like, seriously? Like, come on. You know, like, I agree it may feel different, like we talked about, but why don't we take that energy and redirect it? I'm saying we. Yes, you out there that has a gajillion dollars, I know you want to get in the Telemark industry and make a boot.
Yeah. Call out to someone with billions.
Yeah, I that would be really fascinating. I would love to see if someone, there's room in the space, I think, on all fronts, and I think if someone's willing to accept the size of the market, there's opportunity. But I think if you don't accept the size of the market, it's a rough road and people won't stay in it. I think that's, like we said, I think that's where Scott's at. At the size they are, they can't accept the size of the market for a line item on the budget. So, all right. I digress.
Yeah. Well,
anyways,
I don't know, I guess maybe start to wrap this up. Yeah. The 75 millimeter products are either now impossible to find brand new or difficult to find. That's a big change. I think to look at that potentially negative news in a most positive way we can, I think there's opportunity to develop on the NTN system still. There has been for sure development in the last couple years when there was 22 designs and there was M equipment and various TTS bindings, I guess, but there's still opportunity and room for improvement. And I think if everybody's on the same platform, it's more attractive for a binding company to develop for that platform. So I'm optimistic. I'm not, this is not the death of Telemark. This is hopefully a rebirth. There's again, back to my point early in the podcast of, if we have a product where the skiing sensation is the same, why do we care about the shape of our boots?
100% agree. Just changing times. So I think that's a good That's the best place to end, man. I love that. Thanks for being here. This is good.
Yeah, thank you.
Good way to start.
Fun to chat about that. Get the week off started right. And as always, go shoot me a follow on Instagram at Telite. And I think, I'd love to be back to, maybe further address this topic. Maybe there's certain areas we could have gone a little deeper. As Josh always likes to mention, if you have questions or have a question for us to maybe address publicly here on the Telemark Pirate Radio, that is the Freeheel Life podcast at freeheellife.com. Send them in. Send us your opinions. I think this episode may have pissed off a lot of you and may have also created a why do we care about this reaction from some of you. So let's hear it and send us an email, and maybe we can do a follow-up to this episode.
Yeah, no, I love that. And frankly, I hope this fires people up on all perspectives, because that's what we need, is people actually just caring with the actual telemarketers caring about actual telemark stuff. I think that's what this is all about, and that's how we move forward. I mean, seems pretty simple. Good thoughts today. Yeah, we got some deep stuff today. That was good.
Yeah, fun stuff. Thanks again for having me on, and I'll see you next time.
I love it. All right, brother. At Telite, check him out. All right, so Taylor is our general manager at the Freeheel Life shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. We want to be that preferred shop, and if you can't tell, we care a lot about all of this stuff, and we like to go deep, and we like to think about stuff. We want to have answers to your questions, and that's why we want to be the best out there. And so hopefully you'll find some value in that as well, and you'll shop with us. So you can come to our shop Tuesday through Friday, noon until 7 p.m., Saturdays 10 a.m. until 7 p.m., closed on Sundays and Mondays so the crew can go shred. And you can always reach us at customerservice@freeheellife.com. A lot of these articles we were talking about came from Telemark Skier Magazine. You can find it online at telemarkskier.com. It is not currently a print magazine, but we do have a premium subscription that you can subscribe to get some bonus content online at telemarkskier.com. And shout out to our good friend Craig Dostie, who is the editor-in-chief and is running that and doing a fantastic job. And that's another place you can support our family of brands here at Freeheel Life. Like Tay said, hit me up at podcast@freeheellife.com. And thanks for listening. And until next week, spread telemark always.